Stella stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself in a white dress. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. This was the woman who had once lived on the streets, unsure of where her next meal would come from, and now she was about to marry the love of her life. Mark was one of the richest men in the city. Every morning, she drove his sleek black car to work, passing the busy streets where vendors shouted and people bustled about. But one day, something caught his eye. A young woman sitting in the corner, her clothes torn and dirty. Her face was thin, but her eyes sparkled with a strange mix of sadness and hope. She held a small tin, quietly asking for help. Mark felt a pang in his heart. Why is she out here? He wondered. Mark parked his car and walked towards her. Without saying a word, he placed some money in her can. She looked up, her lips trembling with gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. Mark nodded and walked away, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? Why is she begging? That night, as Mark sat in his grand mansion, her image haunted him. I'll find out her story, he decided. The next morning, Mark drove the same route. As he approached the street corner, he saw her again, sitting in the same spot, and her thin flame and dirty clothes tugged at his heartstrings. This time, Mark didn't just drop the money and leave. He crouched down beside her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her fingers clutching the tin can. "Stella," she replied softly. Mark smiled. "I'm Mark. Do you see it here every day?" She nodded. "It's the only way I can eat." Mark handed her a large sum of money than the day before. Stella's eyes widened in shock. "Why are you so kind to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Everyone deserves kindness," Mark said simply. For the next few days, Mark made it a habit to stop by Stella's corner. Each time, he brought her something, money, food, or a warm drink. Stella's gratitude was genuine, but Mark noticed something else in her eyes, a deep sadness she couldn't hide. "I need to know her story," he thought to himself. As the days turned into weeks, Mark's curiosity grew. Stella was polite but reserved, only sharing little bits of her days. He wondered what could have brought her to this point. One chilly morning, he handed her a hot sandwich and sat beside her on the pavement. "Stella, I see you every day and I want to help you," Mark began, "but I don't know how unless you tell me what happened." Stella stared at the ground, her fingers tightening around the sandwich. For a moment, Mark thought she wouldn't answer. "It's okay," he said, sensing her hesitation. "You don't have to." "No, I'll tell you," Stella interrupted, her voice shaky. "You've been so kind to me. You deserve to know." Mark leaned closer, her heart pounding. Stella took a deep breath, her eyes glittering with unanswered tears. She stared at the busy street, as if gathering the courage to speak. "I wasn't always like this," she began. "I had a family, a mother, a father, and 2 young siblings. We lived in a small house at the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was home." Mark listened intently, his heart heavy with the pain in her voice. "One night, fire broke out," Stella continued, her voice breaking. It started so fast. I tried to save them, but the flames were everywhere. My parents and my siblings didn't make it. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she paused to wipe them away. After that, I had no one, no relative, no friends. I lost everything. I ended up on the street, begging to survive. Mark was speechless. The pain in her story was more than he could have imagined. "I'm so sorry, Stella," he said softly. "No one should have to go through that." Stella gave him a small smile. "It's life. I've learned to accept it." But Mark couldn't accept it. He couldn't bear the thought of someone so young and kind being left to suffer. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I promise, Stella, I'll do whatever I can to help you." She looked at him with a mix of hope and disbelief. "Why would you do that for me?" Mark smiled gently. "Because you deserve better than this." From that day on, Mark couldn't get Stella's story out of his mind. He began visiting her more often, not just to give her money, but to talk, to listen, and to offer her comfort. Each time, Stella grew more open with him. She shared little details about her family, the way her mother loved to sing and how her father would read bedtime stories, and how her siblings would make her laugh even on her worst days. "I miss them so much," she confessed one day, her voice trembling. "Sometimes I dream of them, and when I wake up, it feels like I've lost them over again." Mark reached out and gently touched her hand. "You're not alone anymore, Stella," he said firmly. "I'm here for you." For the first time in years, Stella felt a glimmer of hope. Mark's visit became highlight of Stella's days. Each day he came, he brought something. Sometimes food, sometimes clothes, sometimes just his presence, which Stella had come to treasure the most. He no longer saw her as a beggar. To him, Stella was strong, kind, and brave despite her struggles. And Stella, who had spent so long feeling invisible, began to see herself differently through Mark's eyes. One afternoon, Mark sat beside her on the pavement. The sun was warm, but the streets were noisy with the sound of the honking cars and bustling crowds. "Do you ever think about what you want for the future?" Mark asked. Stella looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of the tin. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I used to dream of being a teacher. I loved helping my siblings with their homework. But now, I don't think I can dream anymore." Mark frowned. "Why not?" "Dreams feel impossible when you're trying to survive," Stella replied. Mark's heart inched at her words. He wanted to tell her that anything was possible, but he knew her life had been filled with disappointment and pain. He needed to show her, not to tell her. "You can still dream, still," she said. "I'll help you make those dreams come true." She looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Why are you so kind to me, Mark? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said with a smile. "You're worth it." As the weeks passed, Mark found himself thinking about Stella more and more. Her laughter, her resilience, and her quiet strength stayed with him long after he left her corner. One evening, as he sat in his luxurious living room, he couldn't help but wonder if his feelings for her were deeper than friendship. Am I falling in love with her? He asked himself. Hey, Mark was a billionaire who could have anything he wanted. But Stella, with her torn clothes and humble spirit, had captured his heart in a way no one else ever had. His friends and family would never understand. They would judge him, question his choice, but Mark didn't care. She's more than her circumstances, he thought. She deserves love and happiness. Determined to show Stella that her life could change, Mark made a decision. He could do anything in his power to help her, no matter what anyone else thought. The next day, Mark arrived at Stella's usual spot with a package in his hand. Stella looked up from where she sat on the pavement, her face lightening up at the sight of him. "Good morning, Stella," Mark greeted with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mark," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. Mark handed her the package. "Here, this is for you." Stella hesitated, looking at the neatly wrapped bundle. "What is this?" "Open it and see," Mark urged. Carefully, Stella untied the package. Inside, she found a thick warm blanket and a pair of new clothes. Her hands trembled as she touched the soft fabric. "Mark, I don't know what to say," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to say anything," Mark said. "I just want you to be warm and comfortable. You deserve that much." Stella hugged the blanket tightly. For years, she had been overlooked, ignored, and treated as invisible. But Mark saw her. He cared for her in a way no one else had ever done it. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking with emotions. "This means more to me than you'll ever know." Mark sat beside her, watching as he carefully folded the blanket. "Stella, you're not alone anymore. I want to help you rebuild your life." Stella looked at him, her heart filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Why do you care so much about me?" "Because you're worth caring for," Mark said simply. Over time, Stella began to open up to Mark more. She laughed at his jokes, shared small details about her past, and even teased him about his fancy car. One day, Mark brought her a small meal from her favorite street vendor. As they sat eating together, Stella finally asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Mark, why do you come here every day? You're a rich man. You don't have to spend time with someone like me." Mark smiled, wiping his hands with a napkin. "I come here because I enjoy your company. You are different from anyone I've ever met, Stella. You're strong, kind, and real." Stella's cheek flushed, and she looked away. She wasn't used to such compliment. "Well, I like having you around too," she admitted shyly. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, and Stella began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: hope. One afternoon, Mark arrived at Stella's spot, but this time he had a different plan. He had spent countless nights thinking about her and her future. Today, he was ready to make a bold step. "Stella," Mark began as he sat down beside her, "I've been thinking a lot about you." Stella looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "About me?" Mark hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I want to help you leave this straight life behind. You deserve so much more than this. I can't stand seeing you here every day struggling." Stella frowned slightly, unsure of what he meant. "What are you saying, Mark?" "I'm saying I want to give you a fresh start." Mark said, honestly, I want to find you a place to stay, get you some proper clothes and help you rebuild your life, but only if you're ready. Stella's eyes widened in disbelief. You'll do that for me? Of course, Mark said, his voice firm. You're not just someone I pass by on the street anymore, Stella. You're my friend. I care about you. Stella felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever cared for her like this before. But fear crept in her heart. What if I can't do it? What if I fail? You won't, Mark said, his voice filled with conviction. And even if you stumble, I'll be there to help you. You are not alone anymore. Tears welled up in Stella's eyes. She had dreamed of escaping the streets, but she had never imagined someone like Mark would come into her life and offer her a way out. Okay, she whispered, her voice shaking. I'll try. Mark smiled, his heart swelling with pride. That's all I wanted to hear. The next day, Mark returned with a car and took Stella to a small apartment he had rented for her. It was modest but clean, with bed, kitchen and a bathroom. This is your new home, Mark said, handing her the keys. Stella stared in awe, her hands trembling. This is mine? Oh yes, Mark said, and I'll help you with anything you need to get started. Stella walked into the apartment, running her hands over the walls and furniture. It felt like a dream. For the first time in years, she had a place to call home. Oh. Thank you, Mark, she said, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how I can ever repay you. You don't have to, Mark said softly. Seeing you happy is enough. As Stella settled in her new life, she couldn't help but feel a growing warmth in her heart for Mark. He wasn't just a savior, he was becoming her everything. The days that followed were both exciting and overwhelming for Stella. She was no longer waking up on the cold pavement or worrying about her next meal. Instead, she had a warm bed, clean clothes, and food in the fridge. Mark visited often, bringing her groceries and checking on her progress. He encouraged her to think about what she wanted to do with life. You've mentioned you love teaching, Mark said one afternoon as they sat in her small living room. Have you thought about pursuing it again? Stella hesitated. It's hard to imagine. I didn't even finish school after the fire. I don't think I could ever be a teacher now. Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. Stella, you're stronger than you think. If you want to be a teacher, I'll help you. We can enroll you in school or find a program to get you started. Stella's heart soared at his words, but doubt still lingered. Why do you believe in me so much? Mark smiled. Because I see how much you care. That's what makes a great teacher. Not just knowledge, but heart. And you have that. Stella felt a fling of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could dream again. Mark's visit became highlights in Stella's days. They could sit for hours talking about everything from their childhood memories to their hopes for the future. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Stella turned to Mark. Why do you spend so much time with me? Mark looked at her, his eyes soft. Because I care about you, Stella. You are not just a friend to me. You're someone I deeply admire. Stella's cheek flushed, and she quickly looked away. I don't understand why someone like you would care about someone like me. Mark reached out and gently touched her hand. Because you are worth it. You've been through so much, and yet you're still kind, strong, and full of life. How could I not care about you? Hey, Stella felt her heart skip a beat. For so long, she had believed she was unworthy of love or kindness. But Mark was changing that. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Stella. Just let me be here for you." As Stella began to adjust to her new life, Mark encouraged her to step out of her comfort zone. He took her shopping for clothes, brought her to community events, and introduced her to new people. At first, Stella was hesitant. She was not used to being invisible, and the tension made her nervous. But Mark was always by her side, reassuring her. "You belong here, Stella," he told her one day. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Slowly but surely, Stella began to believe him. She started smiling more, speaking up, and even dreaming about the future. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't deserve this happiness. She wondered if Mark's kindness would eventually fade. Mark's family began to notice his frequent absence. His young sister Clara was the first to confront him. "Mark, you have been acting strange lately," Clara said one evening during a family dinner. "You're always rushing out and you seem distracted." Mark glanced at his parents, who were also watching him closely. "I've been busy with personal matters," he said, hoping to avoid the topic. Clara wasn't convinced. "What kind of personal matters? You're hiding something." Mark sighed, realizing he couldn't keep a secret forever. "I've been helping someone, a woman named Stella. She had a tough life and I'm trying to make things better for her." His mother, Mrs. Coffer, raised an eyebrow. "Helping someone? What kind of woman are we talking about?" She's someone who have been living on street," Mark admitted. The room felt silent. His father, Mr. Coffer, frowned. "Mark, you are a billionaire. Why are you associating with a beggar?" "Because she's more than that," Mark said firmly. "Stella is kind, intelligent, and resilient. She's been through so much, and she deserves a chance at a better life." Clara shook her head. "Mark, this doesn't make sense. Are you saying you care about her?" Mark met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes, I do. I care about her deeply." His family exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't understand why Mark, with all his wealth and status, would choose to involve himself with someone like Stella. "Just be careful, son," Mr. Coffer said finally. "People might take advantage of your kindness." "She's not like that," Mark said. "You will see." The next time Mark visited Stella, she noticed he seemed quieter than usual. "Is something wrong?" she asked, setting down the book he had brought her. Mark hesitated before speaking. "I told my family about you." Stella's heart sank. "What did they say?" "They are worried," Mark admitted. "They don't understand why I care about you. But I don't care what they think. I know who you are and that's all matter." Stella looked away, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her dress. "Mark, maybe they are right. Maybe you're wasting your time with me." "Don't say that," Mark said, his voice firm. He reached out and took her hand. You're not wasting my time, Stella. You are the best thing that happened to me in a long time." Tears filled Stella's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "I don't want to cause trouble for you." "You are not causing trouble," Mark said. "You're giving me something real, something money can't buy, and I'm not letting you go." Stella smiled through her tears, her heart filled with gratitude and growing sense of love for the man who had changed her life. Mark knew that if his family was going to accept Stella, he would have to show them the woman he had come to know. He invited his parents to dinner at Stella's apartment, hoping to ease the tension and allow them to see the kind-hearted person she truly was. The night arrived and Stella nervously pressed in her apartment, making sure everything was perfect. She had never imagined meeting Mark's family, let alone hosting them. Mark arrived early to help her with the final touches. "Don't worry," he said, seeing the worry on her face. "They'll love you once they get to know you." Stella took a deep breath. "I hope so." When his family finally arrived, Mark introduced them to Stella with a warm smile. "This is Stella. She has been through a lot, but she's an incredible person. I want you all to get to know her." His parents looked at Stella with a mixture of curiosity. They had expected someone different. Perhaps a woman of their own social standing, not someone who had lived on the streets. But as the evening went on, Stella's kindness and warmth began to shine through. She made them laugh with stories of her childhood, her resilience, and her dream for the future. Mark's mother, Mrs. Colfer, found herself softening her eyes, filling with admiration. "You've had a difficult life, Stella," Mrs. Colfer said gently, "but you've shown so much strength." Stella smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. "Thank you, Mama. It's been hard, but I'm learning to move forward." Mark's father, Mr. Colfer, who had been quiet throughout the evening, finally spoke. "You've been through more than most people can imagine, Stella. I can see why my son cares for you." Stella's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you, sir. I promise I won't disappoint him." By the end of the evening, Mark's family had started to see Stella in a different light. They realized that despite her past, she was a strong, compassionate woman who deserved happiness. As the days passed, Mark's family began to warm up to Stella. Clara, who had been the most skeptical, started visiting her regularly, and the two women became close friends. They laughed together, shared stories, and even went shopping. One afternoon, as they sat in the park, Clara turned to Stella. "You know, I was worried about you at first. I didn't understand why Mark would choose someone like you." Stella smiled, feeling the weight of Clara's words. "I understand. I never thought anyone would choose me either." Clara shook her head. "But now I see why. You've changed my brother. He's happier than ever." Stella's heart warmed. "I'm just trying to be the best version of myself." As time went on, Mark and Stella's relationship deepened. They spent more time together, growing closer each passing day. The love they shared was pure and strong, built on trust, understanding, and shared a desire for a better life. One evening, Mark took Stella to the rooftop of his luxurious home, overlooking the city skyline. The stars twinkled above and the night was calm. Stella gazed out at the new view, her mind racing with thoughts of everything she had been through and how far she had come. "Stella," Mark said softly, "there is something I've been meaning to ask you." Stella turned to face him, her heart pounding. "What is it, Mark?" Mark took her hand into his voice filled with certainty. "I love you, Stella. You've changed my life in ways I can't even explain. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Stella's breath caught in her throat. "Mark, will you marry me?" he asked, pulling out a small sparkling ring. Tears filled Stella's eyes as she gazed at the man who had brought her back from the brink of despair. She had never imagined her life like this, but now, standing before him, she knew she couldn't live without him. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Mark smiled, his eyes shining with happiness. He slipped the ring into her finger and they embraced. The world around them disappeared in that moment of pure love. The days following Mark's proposal were filled with excitement and preparations. Stella could hardly believe it. She was about to marry the man she had come to love, the man who had changed her life. Mark spared no expense for their wedding. He wanted everything to be perfect for Stella, but she had a different idea. "I don't need a grand celebration," she told him one evening. "What matters most is that we're together." Mark smiled, taking her hand. "I want the world to know how special you are, Stella. You deserve the best." Despite her initial hesitation, Stella couldn't help but swept up in the excitement. Mark's love for her was so genuine, and she wanted to share that love with everyone she knew. They worked together to plan a wedding that was both beautiful and meaningful. Stella chose a simple dress, and Mark insisted on a beautiful venue in the church, just like the place where she had proposed. As the wedding day approached, Stella couldn't help but feel nervous. She had never imagined this kind of future for herself, and part of her still wondered if she truly deserved it. But Mark was always there to reassure her. "You're more than enough, Stella," he could say, his voice filled with warmth. "You're everything I ever wanted." The day of the wedding arrived, and the excitement was palpable. Stella stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself in a white dress. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. This was the woman who had once lived on the streets, unsure where her next meal would come from. And now she was about to marry the love of her life. As she walked down the aisle, she could see Mark standing at the altar, his eyes filled with tears of joy. When their eyes met, it felt as if the world had stopped. Nothing else mattered in that moment, just the two of them. When Stella reached Mark, he took her hand and smiled. "You look more beautiful than I ever imagined," he whispered. Stella smiled back, her heart racing. "I never thought I'd be here, Mark. I didn't think I deserved this kind of love." "You do," Mark said, his voice steady. "You deserve everything and more." The ceremony was short but beautiful, and as they exchanged vows, Stella felt as if her past pain and headache had led her to this moment. She was no longer the girl who lived on the streets. She was a woman who had found love, hope, and a future. After the wedding, Mark and Stella moved into their new home together. It was a beautiful house with a large garden and plenty of space for them to grow. For the first time in a long time, Stella felt at peace. Mark continued to support her dream, and she decided to enroll in a program to finish her education. She wanted to help others who had been through the same struggle she had. Mark's family had come to love Stella as their own, and they often gather at their home for family dinners and celebration. They had all seen how much Mark had changed since meeting Stella, and they couldn't deny that she was part of their family now. One evening, as Mark and Stella sat on their porch watching the sunset, Mark turned to her. "I'm so proud of you, Stella. You've come so far, and you've taught me more than about love and kindness." Stella smiled, her heart full. "I've never imagined this kind of life for myself, but I'm glad I found you." Mark took her hand in his eyes full of love. "I'm so glad I found you too." Together, they looked out at the horizon, knowing their journey was just the beginning. The future was full of promise, and no matter what challenges they might face, they would face them together. Years passed, and Mark and Stella built a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. They had children, and Stella became a teacher, inspiring young minds with their story of resilience and hope. Mark continued to run his business, but he always made time for his family. He never forgot the woman who had once been a beggar on the street and never took her for granted. Stella too never forgot where she came from. She often visited the places she used to beg, offering food and support to those who were still struggling. She knew how much it meant to have someone believe in her, and she wanted to give that same hope to others. As they grew older, Mark and Stella's love only deepened. They had faced many challenges together, but their bond had only grown stronger. They built a life full of love, and that was all that mattered. And so they continued to walk through life hand in hand, knowing that no matter where the journey took them, they would always have each other. This is the end of our story. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for reaching this far. Kindly leave something in the comment section. And if you're new, I welcome you. I don't take you for granted. Kindly subscribe if you've not yet subscribed to this channel. Leave something in the comment section, and please share this story in that it will be recommended by YouTube. Bye bye. See you in my next video. I love you all.